Thank you all for joining us, and we're pleased to report that our 2017 performance for the pension plan was 13.5%. There was a period over the last few days where the pension plan actually, the value of the combined plans actually exceeded $100 billion for the first time in North Carolina history. Obviously, that's not the case today, but we're very pleased about this performance given the risk profile that this state pension plan has had, not only just over the last year, but really over the last 40 years. We've had a lot of media advisories since our last call, and much of which has to do with pushing the power away from us and down to the hardworking state employees. At the end of the day, you've all heard me say repeatedly, we're in the check delivering business, and being in the check delivering business is not just about buying stamps and ink. It's about actually doing things from an IT perspective to make sure that we get pension and retirement checks out to people both correctly and timely. In light of that, we're having this call today, and there's been a lot of news regarding the pension plan, obviously, about health care and lots of other things. So I know we have a lot of people on the call today, so we'll open it up for questions.
Great, thank you, Treasurer. I'll call Dan Way with the Carolina Journal first. Dan?
Thanks. So in terms of that 13.5%, what will you have to do to make sure that it stays at that rate going forward? And do you see the volatility in the market being short-term or long-term, and how are you going to have to respond to that?
Well, the way that you respond to that individually may be different than the way that we respond as the keeper of the public purse. So we have an asset allocation model, which has not changed since have been the treasurer of North Carolina. So we are doing exactly what we've done as far as asset allocation is concerned. We have about 35% of this money right now that's in fixed income. That means that about 65% is in things that have some level of risk to them. Obviously, fixed income does also. But when you buy fixed income and the value of a bond goes down, if you hold it to maturity, you get it all back plus the interest that was promised to you. So the volatility is obviously a concern, but we are well prepared to absorb any volatility, number one. We have the cash on hand to meet the billions of dollars worth of capital calls. These are blank checks on our state pension plan from commitments made by the previous treasurer. And we have plenty of cash on hand to pay out the over $500 million of pension benefits that are going out on a monthly basis right now.
Dan, you have some follow-up for that?
No, but I was also interested in asking about the plan that the Transportation Department Secretary proposed or floated yesterday in terms of setting up borrowing against state funds to do local and regional transportation projects. Do you, given the fact that you're always touting the need to protect that AAA bond rating, do you see this as a good move or a bad move? Do you have any feelings one way or another about creating such a funding mechanism for transportation projects?
Well, the Secretary has verbally shared what the needs are for transportation in this state, but the Greg Gaskins at the Local Government Commission, as well as our Legislative Director, Edgar Starnes, have been asking for several weeks for the details of what it is they're proposing. As of this morning, we have never received the details of what it is they're proposing. Now, the presentation yesterday was interesting because, as many on this call know, I have the statutory responsibility to produce a debt affordability study to the Governor and the General Assembly by February 1st, which we did. We normally, present that debt affordability study, not just the Governor and General Assembly, but joint committees of the Government Oversight Committee as well as the Finance Committee. Us being on the agenda yesterday for transportation should not be taken as an endorsement of whatever the Transportation Secretary is proposing. Our debt affordability study is something we have to do every year by February 1st. Now, I will just add to that, by what I heard from that meeting yesterday that this is something that they intend to do in the short session. Well, being a previous legislator, I know that if this is something they were intending to do in the short session, that means there's a bill that has the details of what we've been asking for weeks floating around somewhere. And as I've said about some other subjects, which I'm sure I'm going to be asked about in just a few moments, we're not in the business of NO. We're in the business of KNOW. And if somebody has a proposal that has the effect of raising debt on the state of North Carolina as the state treasurer, that's something that I need to KNOW what the details are. I will tell you that none of this should take our focus off the $35 billion of unfunded health care liabilities that this state has and the multiple billions of dollars worth of unfunded pension liabilities. That's where my focus was when I applied for this job. It's where my focus was in my first year as treasurer, and where my focus will be for the remainder of my time as treasurer, is on these unfunded liabilities. Because at the end of the day, Dan, which is the premise of your question, how we acknowledge and deal with these unfunded liabilities is going to be an ultimate driver of whether North Carolina or any state maintains a AAA bond rating. As we sit here this morning, there are 12 states with the AAA bond rating. We wish all states would have that, but obviously that's not the case. Our goal is if only one state has a AAA bond rating in the United States, that it's North Carolina.
Dan, do you have a follow-up on your second line of questioning?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
We have John Morawski with N&O who has joined us for the AMA. John?
Hey, John.
You there, John? All right, somebody sounded like somebody might have dropped off. How about Travis Fain, WRAL? Travis, you there?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I just need to unmute my phone.
No trouble.
I'm interested in the 5.7 million increase that the tax cuts have triggered in lowered withholding for pensioners. And what I don't understand is what the spread is between like a high pension and a low pension. You know, i.e., if I average out how much each pensioner is going to get, it's like $18 a month. But I don't really know if that's an instructive number or if it might be skewed because some people get really big pensions and some people get really small. Can you add some context on that?
I can. I've been a low wage earner in my life, and I've been a high wage earner in my life. So the absolute dollar savings to some is going to be larger, but to the low wage earner, the proportionality is going to be large. Is going to be also larger. So the absolute amount that somebody with a high pension would get would be more, but the meaningfulness of this, so to speak, to the people who get lower pensions would be greater. Let me just, Travis, thank you for your question, and just we responded back to you at the council state meeting. This is not just $5.8 million less in withholding in January. That's going to be every month this year. And at the end of the day, if we had not incorporated this as early as we did, and I have not heard of any government agency that has done this before the deadline, and not actually many private industries have done that. So kudos go to our retirement services division. But at the end of the day, whatever withholding that we were doing because of the tax package passed by the Congress and signed by President Trump, these people would ultimately be entitled to this money as they filed their 2018 return in the winter of 2019. What we were doing is because of some people who took the initiative of Retirement Services Division, we actually were getting that money into people's pockets months before they would have otherwise been entitled to it. But at the end of the day, whether it's $18 per person, is the right thing to do.
Sure. I just wondered is there a way to run a median on it as opposed to an average?
I don't think so. I just think that we just put it together and that That is the actual withholding amount. It was that much less than it was previously.
Okay. And if I could also ask, you also said this morning at Council of State, y'all are about to ask to lower the assured rate of return. Is that something you can give details on today?
Absolutely. It's called the assumed rate of return. And for you folks that are in different parts of your life, just think about it as your kid's 529 plan. The more optimistic you are about how well that plan is going to do, the less money you have to put in it on an annual basis on behalf of your child. This pension plan is no different, except it's hundreds of billions of dollars. And the assumed rate of return for the state pension plan back in the 60s was 4%. That means that the plan assumed it was only going to earn 4% on the money that it was investing. During that period of time, government bonds went to 10%. So even if you're unathletic like I am, if you're only supposed to earn 4% and the government bonds are yielding 10%, that's an easy hurdle for even me to jump over. So in the early 70s, when interest rates were driving north, they raised the assumed rate of return to 7.25%, and it's been there since I was in high school in the mid-70s. So this 7.25% has not been achieved on average for the last 20 years, even with the performance that I reported on this call 15 minutes ago. So last year we went to lower the assumed rate of return from 7.25 to 7.2. You might be saying to yourself, big deal. It's important to know, and it's the most mathematically perverse thing that you will hear this week, the better funded your plans are, the harder it is to lower the assumed rate of return. If you're like some of our border states where some of their pension plans are 55% funded, 60% funded, 17% funded, you can lower the assumed rate of return because you weren't funding it to start with, obviously. If you were, they wouldn't be so underfunded. But when you're dealing with a plan like ours, which is one of the 5 best plans in the United States in terms of its funding level, anytime that you lower that assumed rate of return 5 basis points, 0.05, that's an additional $75 to $80 million per year appropriation by the General Assembly. So when I became the treasurer, I set about to gradually lower this assumed rate of return because of the increased contributions associated with that. But I've made a recommendation to one of my committees that we will bring into a full vote in April to actually lower the assumed rate of return to 7%. The other reason that should be important to the people in this call is simply this. When we went through the process this year of reaffirming our AAA bond ratings with both Fitch, Standard & Poor's, and Moody's, all of them used a assumed rate of return lower than the one that's in our plan currently or proposed. So the rating agencies are way out above us, way out ahead of us on this issue. So as a high military state, it's never a bad idea to use the word I in a conversation. And what that word means is that I hear you, I understand you, and I'm doing something about it. Us lowering this assumed rate of return is an I to the rating agencies. That we hear what you're saying about we expect rates of return to be lower over the next 20 years. We understand what you're telling us, and we're actually doing something about it.
Travis, you got anything else? You got a follow-up to that?
Yeah, for those of us who are not too bright, can you talk about the difference between the 13.5% the percent return that you spoke to earlier in the call versus this assumed rate of return? Why we've never made the 7 if we're at 13.5?
Well, a lot of it has to do with events that happened in our country. In 2001, this country was terrorized with 9/11, and then in addition to that, we had the unfolding of the tech crisis, which took stock market values down tremendously. And then about the time that we recovered from the attacks of 9/11 and the tech crisis, then we were hit with the economic recession of 2008. So So the 13.5% is a 1-year Polaroid shot, and the 20 years is our assumed the rate of return that this plan has achieved over the last 20 years is about 6.8. So over the 20-year period of time, given everything that's happened with interest rates and the economy, we still have not achieved the assumed rate of return.
Okay, so that assumed rate of return is calculated over 20 years, whereas the 13.5% is a year-over-year, single-year increase.
That's right.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
When you're dealing with a plan of this size, you have to look at things in terms of 20 and 30-year periods.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Travis. Ria?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I actually wanted to ask about, some details about the co-investment opportunities that you were looking at with your real estate managers. Are there some, more details on that?
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, yeah. I wanted some more details about the co-investment opportunities that you're considering with your existing real estate managers.
Yes. Well, there are, it's a very granular question, but we have about $9.8 billion or close to $10 billion sitting in real estate inside the pension plan. And most of the, if not all of those commitments were made before I became the treasurer of North Carolina. And in some of those contracts, there were co-investment opportunities so that the North Carolina pension plan could go in and make some side investments with some of the same managers that we put the primary money with, but with lower performance fees and lower management fees. So we're currently considering those, acknowledging where we are in the investment cycle.
Okay. And just one more question. I saw some documents that said that the pension plans were considering, changes to their fixed income portfolio. Is this true? And how are you going to go about that?
That our pension plan is anticipating changes with the fixed income portfolio?
Yeah, that there were, in Feb, you were to discuss some changes to the investment grade fixed income portfolio.
I'm going to take a shot at what I think you're asking me about, and then you can correct me. How's that?
Okay.
There are statutory. There are statutes that determine what in quality of bonds that the fixed income managers can invest in. I think that there are very few what we call AAA investment grade commercial corporate bonds available in the market right now. So we are fortunate that we also have something in the law that says that if we have a fixed income bond in our portfolio, that if the quality of that bond is lowered, like for example, I think Ford Motor Company was back in the economic recession, that we don't have to sell at the bottom. And then we also have something in the statute that allows us to split invest, so not all the rating agencies have to agree. So we just want to make sure in this environment that we have the ability on our fixed income side to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves on names that we're very comfortable with.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Ria, you have any further questions?
No, not at the moment.
Great. See if John Morowski with the NNO might have joined us back. John, you on? Does anyone have any follow-up questions or anybody monitoring that may have a question now?
Hi.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, this is Dion Roberts with the Charlotte Observer.
Hey, Dion.
Hi, Treasurer Folwell. So Wells Fargo is in the news again this week with the Federal Reserve action on Friday. And considering your fiduciary duty regarding the pension plan, which, as of last year, when you voted against 4 of the bank's directors, the pension plan had about 5 million shares, 4.9 million shares. I wonder what you think of the current CEO, and if you think Wells Fargo needs, a new chief executive, and what about the board? Some people like Senator Elizabeth Warren say that all the board members who served while the fake accounts were being opened should leave. What's your opinion on the leadership at the bank today?
Well, I've never met the current CEO of Wells Fargo. I've met previous CEOs. As many people on this call know, that even though Wells Fargo is a huge organization, that there are a lot of people that are in that organization that were previously with Wachovia, who I've had a high degree of respect for most of my life. In terms of what the Federal Reserve did, it sounds like from your question that they did exactly how I voted in the last proxy. You can correct me if I'm wrong about that. I'm not going to run Wells Fargo's business. I voted the way that I did, which is to vote against those members of the board of directors that were on the compensation committee and one of the other governance committees that allowed some of these actions to go on. That's how I voted. And in addition to that, Wells Fargo is a great corporate citizen of this state. We appreciate them being taxpayers and employers in North Carolina. And I think that the CEO of Wells Fargo is doing what I do every day. And that is trying to figure out what's right, get it right, and keep it right for his customers, for his shareholders, and for his employees. And I think that he has the same fiduciary responsibility and passion that I do.
So can you give us any idea how you're going to vote at the upcoming shareholder meeting, this year's shareholder meeting?
Yeah, I have not been presented with what the proposals are. I will tell you that we have as you can imagine, with almost $100 billion, and then there's a $12 billion on top of that in our defined contribution plans. Proxy season around here is like very interesting. You can just imagine how many proxies we get to vote on. So we have strengthened and streamlined our proxy process last year. And so at the end of the day, things that sort of fall out of compliance with the guidelines that we gave our proxy service, they get brought to me by our legal team individually.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, and feel free to contact communications team and offline if I said that the 4 people that we voted against, if that doesn't G-haul with what the Federal Reserve was, if you need to correct me or correct us on that, feel free to call back or ask any follow-up questions on this issue. Our door and mind are open to you.
No, you're right. I mean, the Fed said, basically they ordered Wells Fargo to roll off 4 board members before the end of this year, and that's what the bank is going to do. We expect them to do.
So that means I don't have to vote against them.
Unless you think that the residual board members who were there during the years of the scandal, which if my count is correct, there'll still be about 3 who were there while the scandal was taking place. Those people will be up for re-election. Do you think that they should? Do you think that anyone who was there during the scandal should stay?
Well, I'll look at that a little bit closer as that proxy vote comes up. But as I said, I've never met the former CEO. I've met 2 previous CEOs, and I feel very confident that they're trying to figure out what's right, trying to get it right, and trying to keep it right, and make sure this never happens again.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, John. It sounds like there's a few people on that weren't able to RSVP, so anybody else have a question?
Yes,
Frank H. Dane Huffman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I'll wait.
Okay, it's Hazel Bradford, P&I. Hello.
Hey, Hazel, I was wondering if
you had mentioned at the beginning of the call that your asset allocation model hasn't changed. Are there plans to change that?
Not at this time. We, thank you for joining us, Hazel. We, in 2016, the previous treasurer committed $6.8 billion of capital, which is twice as much than was committed the previous year. And so in 2017, as I promised the folks that I applied for this job to do, that we'd figure out where the money is, how well it's doing, how good the folks are at managing it, and how much are we paying them. This year we're focused on, as we've been the whole time that I've been the treasurer, is where's the value to our participants. Our fiduciary responsibility is to be loyal to these participants and exercise duty of care. I don't anticipate a lot of changes. We are, in many cases, we're right back up against our targets. And it's important to know, which is very confusing, we have statutory targets, we have ranges, we have median targets, and then we have benchmarks. So we're going to try to simplify that this year. I think it's way too confusing for people to follow. So right now, it's like it was last year. We're staying the course in terms of asset allocation. And ironically, Hazel, since you've asked the question, I was going back through some papers that I had when I was in the legislature from 2010, 2008, 2011, and really the asset allocation, except for maybe one sleeve of opportunistic investing, the asset allocation really hadn't changed during that whole period of time.
Hazel, do you have a follow-up?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Great. Dane?
Yeah, hey, Dale. Hey, thank you, Frank. I wanted to just make sure I'm clear on a couple of things that I had a question. The 13.5%, Dale, you're referring to the calendar year of 2017, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to lower the assumed rate of return to 7%. Is that something you want to do this year, or did you have a time frame on that?
This year. My goal was to lower it 5 basis points every year for the 4 years of my term. But I think that after working with the General Assembly and staff and stakeholders, including, don't forget that 2/3 of this plan is the teasers, the state plan, but 1/3 of it's the Elders plan. So I've been spending a lot of time over the last 6 weeks meeting with the County Commissioners Association and the League of Municipalities, because they also have a big say in this. And we're meeting with all the finance officers, finance directors, city managers, county managers to let them know this. We're trying to make sure that we're not just focused on preserving and strengthening this plan, but we got to figure out a way to sustain it given what's happening with assumed rates of return, what's happening with life expectancies, what's been happening with fees that the fund's been paying out, and what some predict will be less than a 50% chance of hitting 7% on average over the next 20 years. So,
okay.
So I'm gonna recommend at the April meeting that we lower it to 7%, but we've been doing a lot of lead work behind the scenes, and I've said this on this call before, and I'm not sure how far it goes with people, but you can go to the Google and you can read some press releases from some other treasurers around the country with all these fancy adjectives in them about how they've lowered their rates of return to 5%. Well, they weren't funding it anyway. They weren't funding it at 8, they weren't funding it at 7, they weren't funding it at 6, so what does it matter if they lower their assumed rate of return to 5% when they weren't doing it at all? The better funded you are, the harder it is to lower this assumed rate of return, and I'm doing it in concert because we want to give the municipalities, the cities and the counties, and the state, the legislature and the executive branch, certainty about what this benefit is going to cost them as an employer of people in the next 15 years.
Okay, and by the April meeting, are you talking about the Council of State?
No, this is not a Council of State issue. This is a teasers issue. teasers and Elgers. We have a meeting coming up. Actually, we just had a meeting where I proposed this idea. We had the actuaries that came in and presented what this would look like.
Okay.
These folks have gone back to the League of Municipalities, the County Commissioner Association, and they said this is what the actuarial report shows for the next 20 years. This is what the treasurer thinks we need to do to bring certainty and these jagged edges of what's going on in South Carolina right now, for example, of these contributions, and trying to smooth all this stuff out to give these people budget certainty in their operations.
Okay. And if it goes to
Dane, I'm going to interrupt you. And the OSBM director who works for the governor. Excuse me. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Go ahead.
So if it goes to 7%, if that's approved in April, does that impact the funding that you need from the General Assembly?
Yes. Anytime that you lower the assumed rate of return, everything else being equal, that impacts the amount of funding. That's why, as I said earlier, it's the most perverse mathematical thing you'll hear all day. The better funded you are, the harder it is to lower the rate of return. You may want to ask yourself rhetorically, why has no treasurer lowered this rate of return since I was in high school? And the reason is no treasurer wants to show a pension plan that's less funded than when they started. And I can't do that. This is the reality of what we're dealing with. It's not emotional, it's not political. This is the mathematical reality. And by doing what's right and telling the truth to the people of this state means that this pension plan is less funded, shows a lower funded ratio, then that's the result of that. On the opposite end, Dane, and I'll just spend 40 seconds on this, I can make this pension plan, which is about 92% funded today, I can make 100% funded in 5 seconds. I could just raise the assumed rate of return to something a little higher than 7.25%, and it would show on a piece of paper that's 100% funded. But if you if you have not achieved that on average over 20 years, it's not telling the truth and it's not doing the right thing.
So if you need more funding from the General Assembly, what was the funding that you had in 2017? What do you think you would need if you're going to drop it to 7%?
Well, we're gonna smooth out this funding over a 5-year period, and we're gonna start setting this thing on a 5-year period. We're gonna do an actuarial report every 5 years. We're gonna look at life expectancies every 5 years. We're going to adjust these assumed rates of return every 5 years. We since it hadn't been done for 41 years, I don't want to get in this business as treasurer or whoever the next treasurer is of fits and starts with all this. I want to give everybody certainty about what's going on, and but we are optimistic about the response. People know, as I hope you do by this point, Dane, in our relationship. I don't take myself real seriously, but I take this work really seriously, and I think that North Carolina is one of the few states in the country that has a real opportunity of pulling itself out of these unfunded health care and pension liabilities.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. One other thing, Chief Investment Officer. You announced on January 8th that you were going to fill for the position. Have you posted the job yet? And what's the, do you have people applying? Have you posted the job? What's the status of that?
Well, as you can imagine, I get emails every week from people who want that job. The direct answer to your question is I have not posted it. One of the board members of the Investment Advisory Committee, which is an advisor to the treasurer on this issue, stated to me and that when I told this person we've had 7 chief investment officers in 14 years, he said that something's wrong with the job description. When you have 7 of something in 14 years, maybe there's something wrong with the job description. So before we post anything, we're going to make sure that we have the job description correct to reflect the culture that we're trying to create here, to reflect the seriousness of what it really is going to mean to sustain these plans going forward. And then in addition to getting the job description correct, then we have to talk about the process and the timeline. I can tell you that I'm not going to be in a hurry to make a bad decision here. When you've had 7 chief investment officers in 14 years, some of them are interim, some of them came and then they came back. We have people from the Retirement Services Division who is in the back office operations of the State Treasurer's Office who became the Chief Investment Officer. That even happened for a period of time. So we're going to be diligent about it because we think it's a very serious role, and we want someone in that position that understands the seriousness and the fact that I want somebody who can look through the eyes of the average state employee, the people that are educating your kids today, the people who are protecting you from crime today, the people who are paving our roads today, the average state and local employee. I want a chief investment officer who knows how to understand that we got a lot of people in this plan who every day serve the needs of these citizens with their back and their feet and their hands and their heart and their mind. And I want a chief investment officer that will understand really what that means every time they make a decision in this pension plan.
This is Hazel. Could I follow up on that? As far as
go ahead, Ray.
have you?
Thanks.
Dave, you through?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No troubles. Rhea, do you have a question? Oh, is that Hazel? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Hazel. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Is it possible? Are you considering or not ruling out having it done in-house and not having a CIO position?
No, I think that whether it's a CIO position or a division director, we have the retirement services director runs the retirement services. A chief investment officer implies that they have invested money before. So as I said, one great question, follow up to Dane's question, Hazel, that we want to make sure that we have the job description correct.
Hazel, do you have any further follow-up?
Well, this is Dan Way. I was just wondering, where does the pension plan stand today in terms of dollars? You said it peaked over $100 billion for the first time, but where's it at today?
Well, it's probably somewhere between 95 and 100 billion dollars. If when you see the stock market going down 1%, that's probably about $1 billion. It's just the way it's working out these days. So
Okay.
I know. So that's a great question, but I haven't gotten a mark on it. I haven't gotten a mark on it today. And before everybody leaves the call, I was surprised that nobody's asked me about my remarks to the Board of Governors last week and relating to this merger and its possible impact on the State Treasurer's Office. So anyway.
John, I was thinking that maybe John with N&O was going to ask that. John, did you make it on the call yet? Nope. Great. Does anybody else have any follow-up questions for the Treasurer?
Yeah, this is Travis again with WRAL, and I'm sorry I'm not going to ask about that merger. I know it's important and I need to spend some time on it, but I'm just not kind of in a place where I'm going to do that right now. Did I understand correctly that you said for every half a percentage point that we lower the assumed rate of return, that either triggers a decrease in the percentage funded we are, i.e. 92% would go down, or it triggers 75 to 80 million more that the General Assembly has to put in? So every half a percentage point is about 80 million bucks that the General Assembly would have to put in.
Travis, great question, but you missed a zero. Every half a percent is 50 basis points. What we've lowered it is 0.5 basis points. So not a half a percent, but 0.5 basis, not 50 basis points, but 5 basis points.
So if you go from 7.2 down to 7, how much would the General Assembly have to put in per year to keep it at the 92% rate, funded rate?
We can get you the specific examples, but 5 basis points is about $75 million. But see, I need to break that out between the Elgers and the teasers. So it's not.
But I mean, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
No, well, because of the way the actuaries let you do this smoothing model, it happens over a 4-year period of time.
Okay.
So I mean.
I'd be very interested in that number, or in those numbers.
Okay, we'll be glad to do that.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Travis,
sir.
maybe we can get a little get together offline. We'll get some folks in and get you some more detail on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
But as long as I'm the treasurer, I'm committed to preserving, strengthening, and sustaining the defined benefit plan that has been in existence for the last 50 years.
Thank you.
Before the treasurer has closing remarks, does anyone have any additional questions? Hearing none, I'll turn it over to the treasurer.
Thank you. We appreciate your interest in AMA. We've had a lot of great questions today, as well as comments about our even doing this. I appreciate staff putting this together. I will use my remaining remarks to talk about the merger that I opined about last week with the UNC Board of Governors. I'm not in the business of NO, I'm in the business of KNOW, and the UNC hospital is that's big. It reflects billions of dollars worth of investments that the taxpayers of this state have made. In addition to that, there are 14,000 state employees that work for UNC hospitals that, behind their faith and their family and their health, the two most important things in their life are their health care and pension, which we have the responsibility for. In addition to that, the UNC system sends me probably $800 million a year, the whole UNC system, not just the hospital, for pension and health care payments. And then, as far as these two hospitals are concerned, last year we spent almost $450 million with these two hospitals. So anything or any transaction that has to do with the transfer of assets away from the taxpayers of this state that have the potential of driving up cost of health care when I only have one shot of driving down cost of health care is something that I have the fiduciary responsibility to ask questions about. I know you can't see this on the phone, but I'm holding up a credit card, and nobody on this phone call takes one of these out of their wallet or their purse and not know what it's going for and the value of what they're getting and what the price is. No one. But yet we have something called a health insurance card where people pull this out of their wallet to be consumers, and then they end up getting an explanation of benefit like the one I'm holding up, where no one can say what the value or the price or what it is they paid for. We cannot drive down the cost of health care in North Carolina if we don't put the power back into the hands of our participants and turn them into watchdogs. I applaud what my mentor for 30-some years, Warren Buffett and Jamie Dimon and Jeff Bezos, just announced last week. But I want to say this on this call for the ones that are remaining. That as big as that transaction was and as much news as it made around the world, there are more, as many participants in your state health plan than domestically exist with those three entities on a combined basis. So we are taking advantage of our largeness. We are signing contracts that benefit our taxpayers and our participants and not big pharma and big healthcare. And we can no longer sustain these plans by being part of the medical arms race that has been going on in this state and this country.